Hey, thank you for checking out another short devotion. I want to talk to you a little bit about forgiveness, and I want to start out by talking about some of my favorite movies. Have you ever seen the Spider-Man movies? There's a bunch of them. There's some new ones, but then there's a bunch of different reproductions of Spider-Man as well. In a lot of the Spider-Man movies, you have that one scene where Uncle Ben and Peter Parker are having that talk. And Uncle Ben says that famous line, with great power comes great responsibilities. And in other words, the gifts and the blessings you've been given also comes with a job description. And this isn't a new thing. This has been going on forever, way back to Father Abraham. If you remember that conversation he had with God, God says, I'm going to bless you, which was the gift, so that you could be a blessing to all nations, which was the job description. So there's an understanding every blessing, every act of kindness, every act of mercy, every act of grace that God sends to us is intended for us to redistribute. Now that includes forgiveness. Now the reason I say forgiveness is because sometimes this is easier said than done. God provides us with forgiveness. He gave us way more than we could ever deserve, or really way more than we need. Not only did he give it to us, but he paid for it, and he paid a very precious price for it. That was the whole point of Jesus coming. And Jesus started paying that price for our forgiveness when he was born. The day he was born, he began to endure all kinds of issues. He was resisting temptations. He completely denied himself. So all these attractive temptations that bombard us every day. Think of all the temptations that we give into just because we want to give into them. Well, Jesus walked a perfect life, and he denied himself all of these temptations. And ultimately, Jesus was betrayed by a friend. How bad does that hurt? Think of the times that you expected love and support from somebody, and they just totally turned their backs on you and did the exact opposite. And he was rejected by his country. Think about that same thing for on a bigger level. A group of people that you think would have your back just totally left you high and dry. He was tortured and he was murdered by illegal occupants because the Roman armies have moved into Israel. They did not belong there, but they occupied it, and they were the ones that not only tortured him but murdered him on the cross. And they did it because Jesus' own country people asked him and begged him and demanded that they do it. Um, this was not something forced on Jesus. This was something Jesus chose to do. So if God's only son was going to pay such a great price for our forgiveness, you could understand why it is so personal and so important to God that we also demonstrate not only the receiving of that forgiveness, but the giving of that forgiveness. That we tell people how they can get that forgiveness from God, but also that we practice it and we display it in our day to day life. At the end of Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells a story that reflects God's attitude on this. It's about a king that was settling his books. He brought in a slave that owed him a huge amount of money. Matter of fact, it was an unpayable amount of money. A slave could not possibly earn the amount of money that he would need to pay this king back this debt. And the king was going to sell him and his family to get a little bit of this money back. But the slave begged for mercy. And the king not only gave him mercy, not only gave him more time, but canceled the debt altogether. Imagine the freedom that gave that slave. Well, that slave went out there and he found another slave that owed him a relatively small amount of money, grabbed him by the throat, demanded his money, and that slave began to beg him for mercy. But he didn't give him mercy. He had him thrown in jail because he couldn't pay back the debt. Well, the word got back to the king about the unforgiving servant, and spoiler alert, it did not end well for that servant. So you see God's passion towards not only his desire for us to be forgiven, but his desire for us to demonstrate an awareness and appreciation of not only his forgiveness, but what it cost him by being willing and obedient to give that forgiveness to others. Speaking of scary stories, have you ever prayed the Lord's Prayer? I'm doing a lot of scary stuff. Maybe I should have saved this for Halloween. But anyway, have you ever prayed the Lord's Prayer? Look it up. It's scary, man. It's in Matthew 9, and there's a part of the Lord's Prayer where we ask God. We say, God, please forgive me in the way that I forgive other people. Man, that's scary, because sometimes I struggle with forgiveness. There's people that I have a grudge against that I've been struggling with for 25 years. And I mean, I say I forgive them, but man, I still struggle with that. I still struggle with letting it go. You know what I'm saying? So we're praying that prayer and we're asking God to treat us in a way that we're maybe not willing to treat other people. And I think this is really important and humbling to realize. But lastly, I want to end on this note, on a positive note. Yes, we should forgive people because it's our responsibility. Yes, we should forgive people because God demands it. But perhaps one of the most beautiful things about Christians is they forgive people because they can't help it. There's a story Jesus told when he was at a dinner party, and this woman interrupted and poured out this box of perfume. The perfume was worth in the range of about $30,000, and she just dumped it on his feet, and people went crazy. Some people were freaking out because of who this woman was. She had a bad reputation, but some people were freaking out because they're like, "Oh my God, you know the money it took to buy this perfume?" She just dumped it out all over Jesus' feet. But Jesus focused on this one thing: she can't help it. Jesus told them, if you realize how much you have been forgiven, then you can't help but let that love pour out of your life. And that's my prayer for me. And that's my prayer for all followers of Jesus Christ, that we understand and we realize the vastness of God's forgiveness for us. Not only the vastness of his forgiveness, but how undeserved that forgiveness was, and how much he paid for that forgiveness with the life of his one and only Son. And that would overwhelm us with such humble gratitude that we can't help but forgive others. We can't help but allow that love to overflow in the lives of all of those around us, especially those who don't deserve it, because that's exactly who we were when we received it. We were the people who didn't deserve it. I love you. Thank you for tuning in. If you've got something to talk about, something to pray about, feel free to look us up at First Baptist Honeypath. If this devotion bless you, please feel free to share it with others. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in.